Welcome! Thank you so much for joining me on the Socially Delightful podcast. I'm Jewel, human connection enthusiast and your host, and this show is all about delighting in yourself, delighting in socializing and in others, and creating truly supportive, delightful friendships and relationships, even in our modern world with our modern stress. In this podcast, we have fun creating a new culture of living in social delight. Now let's dive into how we're going to do that today. Hello and welcome back to the Socially Delightful podcast. I am so delighted to have y'all here choosing to listen to this episode when there's, just so many options. So thank you for coming to hang out with me today. I have my friend Sade Curry on the podcast today, and she is a dating coach for divorced women and the host of the Dating After Divorce podcast. Yours truly has been on there quite a while ago, so go check out our episode. So she is certified in trauma coaching, feminist coaching, and is a life and relationship coach. She teaches women strategies for going through divorce with emotional balance, healing, rebuilding, and finding love again. Her coaching philosophy is to help women succeed by practicing personal leadership and autonomy in their lives, work, and relationships. I'm so excited to have her here today. At the end, we're going to mention this as well, but she also has a freebie for everybody called the 50 green flags for a healthy relationship, which I just think is so cool. And even if you are in a healthy relationship right now, or you are married, or anything, I think this is going to be helpful, and a lot of it is going to relate to friendship too. So just something for you to be mindful of and to give yourself awareness to, but we will talk about that more. Sade, thank you so much for joining me.
Absolutely, Jill. Oh my God, it is such a pleasure to be here. Thank you for having me. I love all of your work on relationships and friendships. I think it's hugely important. So, of course, I'm delighted to be here.
I'm so excited. This is a perfect time to tell you this. I have never told you this, but when I first became aware of you, I heard you on a podcast. And so Sade and I were part of like similar groups in the past. And so we've been, running in the same circles for a while now, collaborating, doing things. But when I first got introduced to you and what you do, I was so bummed that you were specializing in divorce, because I was like, I adore this person, and like I had specific things that I wanted coaching help with, and I was like, maybe she can do this. Like I was really so bummed in the beginning. I love what you do, don't get me wrong. I think it's so important. I'm so glad that you were there for your people, but I just adored you, adored your energy, and you really embodied the things that I was looking to practice more of. So I'm so excited to have you here, and yeah, surprise.
Thank you. Thank you, Jill. Yeah, I know that can sometimes I get a little like, oh, I'd love to talk about this topic or that topic, but I pick my niche because it really is an underserved group of people. There is a lot of material out there about dating,
Yeah.
but it doesn't always take into consideration just some special nuances that women who are dating after a divorce face. And then there tends to be an age difference too. Women who are divorcing, mostly, not all, but largely fall into their late 30s, 40s, and 50s. And so there are just certain age considerations. And I was just like, as much as I would love to do all of the things, I really feel like I'm called to serve this group of women.
Yes, and I was, again, so bummed that, didn't coach on business, because you have had such a successful business for so long. You've done all these amazing things. But tell me a bit about your story as far as how you got into this, what brought you to this, why it really matters to you. I'm just throwing so many questions at you, but tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so I mean, my story is, I mean, it's every divorced woman feels like we feel like our stories are very personal and like, oh my God, I can't believe I went through this. But it's really like the story as old as time. So you get married too young, or even if you're not super young, you're naive and you don't really know how to choose a partner. And so you pick the partner that isn't right for you, but you're also socialized to make your relationship the most important thing, which is what I did. Like that was the life goal. nothing else mattered. I mean, things mattered, but nothing mattered as much as being in your marriage and keeping your marriage together. So even though the marriage was not working, I kept at it, kept working at it, stayed in it for 17 years. And then right around the 17-year mark, I mean, everything fell apart. Like everything that I'd been trying to hold together really fell apart in a way that was like, it was irreparable. And so we went through that divorce. It took about 3 years for the whole divorce to be over. But because of the way society is structured, and I think we'll talk about this very much, it really applies to friendship. When a marriage falls apart, everything falls apart. So remember when I said I was socialized to believe that this was everything,
Yeah.
and society kind of holds that up. And I think it's changing. So I'll be 48 in a few days. So when I'm talking about the way it was structured, I'm really talking about 30 years ago, what I was being taught, you know 30 something years ago. So things are changing, and I'm hoping younger people will have a different experience. But when a marriage then falls apart, because a woman's identity, if you live in a patriarchal environment, is very much bound up in that, it feels like everything falls apart. And in many ways, everything does, because your environment supports you holding the marriage together. So if the marriage falls apart, the environment also begins to um, view that situation as being abnormal, and you shouldn't be doing that. And that's kind of what I experienced in many ways. So financially, there were a lot of consequences to divorcing. For my kids, there were a lot of consequences. Identity wise, getting back into the workplace, all of those things had very serious consequences. And also, like what we're here to talk about today, it had serious consequences, not as serious as maybe my children's well-being, but it did have consequences and fallout for my friendships as well. So I always tell women, like, the divorce itself, where you are separating from this person, is just the primary loss. There are multiple secondary losses that happen as part of that. And that's why divorce is so painful. Like, it is huge, because sometimes you're losing where you live. Some people are losing their jobs or having to go back to work. You're redefining your relationship with your children. You're losing friendships. I mean, it just like, there's a whole lot of stuff that happens around it.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. You're so right. And for you, because I know I'm a little bit familiar with your work, but I want everybody else to be too. So for you, what would you say are like the pillars that you help clients do now as far as like rebuilding? Because I'm sure as well, depending on their situation, they might not be ready to date, but as far as it comes with dating and like rebuilding, like what are some of the pillar things that maybe you just wish you would have known then?
Oh, so many, so many. So I typically don't help women through the court itself. So there are coaches that will specifically teach you how to navigate the court system, and they kind of work in tandem with the attorney. What I mostly work on is helping that woman, like for my clients who are divorcing. Sometimes I will help them plan out the divorce, because if they're still in the relationship, there's a lot that's coming at them in the relationship. And so even the decision to divorce can be really difficult to know, like, what do I even want? Do I even want to leave? So I have some clients that I will work with on that. I will work with some clients on really not people pleasing within that context. So a lot of the problems are, you know, letting go of the societal programming that says, hey, you need to do what the man says. You need to make everybody happy. You need to do what your parents say. You need to do what your church says. So letting go of all of that, really rebuilding their self-esteem, rebuilding their sense of self outside of the relationship, owning their life, like really saying, oh, I'm a sovereign, autonomous human, and I can do things just for me. Letting go of the excessive guilt or feeling selfish. Of course, women tend to want to put their children first, but making sure that while they're caring for their children, they are caring for themselves, because the best gift you can give your children is a mother who's healthy mentally, spiritually, physically, in all of those areas. So, but the bulk of my work is rebuilding after divorce. So the bulk of it is okay, the divorce is done. Now what do you want to do with your life? Like what are your dreams? What are your goals? And for many women, that's dating. They want to date after divorce. They want to meet a new partner. They still have that dream of having companionship. It looks different for every woman. Some are like, I just want a travel buddy. Some are, I just want a boyfriend. Some are, I want to get married again. And so coming out and navigating this whole new landscape, because I got married in, gosh, 1998. And so I know that feels like eons ago. The world was completely different. We had barely started using email at the time. Like email was new. Well, yeah, for me, because I grew up in Nigeria. So in 1998, email was fairly established, but it was still like a big deal, right? And then cell phones had come in. It wasn't like this at all. There was no such thing as social media. That wasn't a thing. And so dating apps were not dating apps per se. They were more like websites where you could go post something and then someone would make a comment or email you. Like it was very analog. And so someone who gets divorced and comes out into the world today and wants to date is facing a very different world than the one that they went in, especially if they're about my age. So if you're talking women in midlife, it's very different. So one, you're not in college anymore. It looks like nobody's single. You don't, there are third spaces where people can hang out outside of home and work. Those are basically disappearing. And
Mm-hmm.
so just that sense of community, a lot of those things are different now or lost. And so it can be really jarring for a woman to try to find a partner in this day and age. And so, and then they're at the same time, they're working on like their professional lives, their businesses. Many of them have children. And so they're juggling this dating world that looks very different from when they were in college or in their 20s. And so that's my work. My work is really to help them navigate that. Also, first of all, just even help them figure out, do I even want a relationship?
Mm-hmm.
Because some of them are going back into the dating world from the place of, oh my God, I got to fix this by having another relationship. Not really.
Yeah. Yeah, so huge. So really, again, connecting back to that sovereignty and making decisions
Mhm.
from there for what they want for the next chapter in their life and even what they want from a partner.
100%, 100%. So we talk about whether or not they want a partner. We talk about what kind of partner. We lay a foundation of their own core values. Like I do a lot of self-discovery. I know a lot of people feel like, that's too much work. But that is the piece of work that makes everything else easy. Because when you're
Mm.
connected to yourself, you don't have to be in reactive mode to everybody and everything that's coming at you. You can just be like, yep, nope, I figured out who I am and what I want. And it's such a deep level that I don't even have to overthink any of these decisions. The decisions just come super easy.
Yes. Okay. Does that sound familiar or not, anybody? So, yes, and this relates so much, by the way, Sade, this relates so much to creating friendships, friend groups. One thing that I was really surprised by when I started, being, if you will, like a friendship advocate was that there were some women, maybe more so around my age, where they were partnered or they were, going to get married, but didn't have any friends and had no idea how to go about that. And I really bet that a lot of your strategies, and again, a lot of your green flags from your freebie of 50 green flags for a healthy relationship also really apply to friendship, especially for what we're looking for, because a lot of times people are lonely because they don't know enough people. They're lonely because they don't have the meaningful bonds that they want. So, really, very applicable. I could probably honestly have you come back for an episode on how dating is so similar to friendship, but I want to stop myself here because I also want to make sure we really talk about and acknowledge, and this goes for anybody, even if somebody's not going through a divorce right now, having and creating a new friend group is something that I know I went through. I, could think of 5 people off of the top of my head where they have had to pivot their communities, whether it was, people getting sober and wanting to switch that, wanting to have more healthy lifestyles, but also too falling outs and things like that, realizing people aren't the best fits. That does happen. right? So I know that you had some experience with that when you got divorced. Would you mind sharing a little bit about that?
Oh yeah. Oh my gosh, I have so much to say. But first of all, I want to respond to something you said about like,
Mm,
being married and having friend groups. So, this is my own personal philosophy. I believe that friendships are more important than partnerships. So,
mm,
that may not be true for everyone, but I believe that friendships, and this is not just for, women. There's a cliche, they're like, well, women rely on
yeah,
their girlfriends and then men rely on their women. Like, no, no, no. I think that individually, no matter where we fall, gender wise, our friendships are more important than our partnerships. And we've sort of turned that on its head. I think that's because of the patriarchy, and the way the world has evolved over hundreds of thousands of years. This is not about anyone who is alive right now.
yeah,
The patriarchy was invented
yes,
long before any of us. So I'm not, yelling at anyone who exists today. The patriarchy has been there for thousands, maybe millions of years. Who knows? But I believe that friendships are more important because one, our friendships actually embody more health than our partnerships do, because they're just friendship. Just by definition, our friendships have built-in appropriate boundaries. It's so much you don't really see that enmeshment. Of course, when people are toxic, there's you got stuff going on, but overall, nobody expects their friends to like be all over in and out of every part of their lives.
yeah.
And in our partnerships, we shouldn't be doing that either, but we think we should because we've been programmed to do that. So after my divorce, one of the things that I wanted to do, and I'll tell the story of what happened with my friendships at that time, but I wanted to talk about this because it just came to mind. One of my philosophies was I was going to find a new partner, but if I didn't, I was going to create my golden girls. Like,
Mm,
so like, because not everyone finds their perfect partner. Like, it's not 100% of the time. Now, if the more work you do on that, the more likely you will. But I wasn't sure that I would find the person who was right for me. And so I thought, well, I'll find a partner, or I'll gather my golden girls. And I knew exactly who they were. My two best friends and my big sister. And we were
oh,
going to move in together, not immediately, but like maybe when we were like 65 or 70. And we're going to retire together, we're going to buy a mansion, and we're going to ride out our golden years together. And so that was my plan B to dating. And I still love that. And I found that resonates with so many people where they're like, oh, being married and living happily ever after until I die is not the only option. And for many people, even if you are married, someone's going to go first. And I know that sounds kind of dark, but
no, it's a reality.
it's reality. So having a friendship group, I believe, is super important. Multiple friendship groups is very, very important. In my case, so at the time of my divorce, I was a stay-at-home mom, and most of my friendships revolved around my children. So I was friends with other women whose children were friends with my children. And so you can already start to see that those friendships were not based on my core values. Now, we had other values that were similar and spiritual values, but they were not based on my core values.
Mm,
They were not based on, okay, me thinking about who am I, and who are the people I want to have in my life. So ideally, looking back, that should have been a friend group, but it should not have been the only friend group that I had. But at that time it was. So I had, my closest friends didn't live in my state. They lived far away. And when I separated from my ex-husband, it I was the only non-married person in that group. So immediately there was just a whole lot of weirdness that happened. And my friends were sympathetic, but it became pretty apparent pretty quickly that they were like uncomfortable with it. Now, what I would have appreciated is someone saying, hey, I'm just really uncomfortable with you right now.
mm,
But I guess that would have been hard to say. I don't know. But it took me a minute to realize what was happening. So little signs, things like my daughter's best friend in that group, her mom started turning down requests for play dates. And
mm,
that was so heartbreaking because we were going through so much. We had just moved to a new home. I mean, my kids were going, and so them holding on to those friendships was super important to me. And so then to have, them saying no to play dates just all of a sudden. Like we used to have like sleepovers and all of the things that really hurt. Then there was another person who, the way the friendships worked, like all of us were Facebook friends with everybody. So everybody's husbands was Facebook friends with everybody's wives and the older kids, and we were just like this group of people. Well, shortly after the separation, one of the husbands unfriended me on Facebook. I didn't even notice. And then the older daughter of this particular family also unfriended me. But the mom was still my friend. And I was like, well, that just seems kind of weird. Like, why? Not that I needed any. I never messaged the husband or the daughter, but it just sent a message to me, or I received a message that they were uncomfortable with something, and so they were changing the way the group dynamic works. So just being divorced, and Whiskers was also a very religious group, and this religion did not approve of divorce. So I understood that me being divorced caused them some challenges. But then also immediately I realized that I couldn't continue to name them as friends in the way that I had in the past. So 100% it was their right to, say, hey, I don't want to do play dates, or hey, I don't want to be Facebook friends. But then I had to ask myself, was I comfortable being friends in that way? They weren't comfortable with how I had changed. So I had to ask myself, am I comfortable with the way the group dynamic has changed? Because I thought things were just going to go on as
Yeah.
before. But it wasn't that way for them. And so I started to examine and re-examine, my relationships. And I also started examining even relationships, like you could say these were my core, like in the middle, like the rings around my relationships. There were people who were on the outer rings who made comments about the fact that I was divorced, who said things to me that were, hurtful or, inappropriate, in the sense that we're not friends like that.
Yeah.
You don't have a say, and I haven't invited you to have a say. And so one of the things I did during that period was every Sunday, I would make a list of everyone that I had spoken to, and how I felt when I interacted with them. So if someone texted me, I would, write all the names down and say, well, when this person texted me and we had that conversation, how did I feel? So I would check in with
Ooh.
myself, and I began to rearrange all of the people in my life based on that. And what came out of that, I call it a relationship audit.
Mm.
Because sometimes a person has a tag, like the person has the word friend. You have attached the word friend to a person,
Yep.
but you haven't defined who a friend is. And so you're giving that person the access of a friend, but the interaction is not what you were expecting. And so I took all the labels off everyone, family, friends, and I just examined the interactions, and then I put people in rings around myself. I was very analytical about this.
No, that's so funny because it relates so much to what I recommend people do for different situations because it is really helpful. And I love the way you are thinking about it and talking about it. The relationship audit, beautiful. Keep going.
Yeah. And so what became very apparent, and this is just blew my mind, was that I had a friend that I had known longer than this friend group. So she was sort of like an individual friend. She wasn't a part of any of my friend groups. And I had met her about 3 years before I met this other group of women. Because I met this group of women when I started homeschooling my kids, and we were all homeschool moms, and all of the kids. It was great. I have no regrets really around these friendships. Every friendship, no matter how long it lasts, is a gift because people give you their
Mm.
presence.
Mm-hmm.
But there was this woman, and so she I had met her when she was single, and throughout the time, I was already married at the time, and we hung out a little bit. Every once in a while, she would come over. She went through some things like in her family, and so she would come over and have dinner with my husband and I. And then she got married, but then she had I think she had a newborn or was pregnant at the time of my divorce. So unlike me and my friends who had, teenagers and middle schoolers, she had an itty bitty baby. So
Yeah.
she was sort of in this off in the corner, and we reached out once in a while. We were friends, but it was like an outer ring kind of relationship. Well, what became apparent when I did my relationship audit was that she was super supportive. I hadn't even seen that. She would call, she would check in, we would have conversations. She was never judgmental. There was no judgment from her at all. As the weeks went on, I realized that I never feel bad when I talk to her,
Mm.
right? And then when I had like really significant needs, she would always offer, "Hey, is there something I can do to help? Can I help with that? Is it okay with you, for me to help with that?" And today she is, so I have two best friends. One of my best friends has always been my best friend. She lives overseas, so we've never, for the last couple of decades, we haven't lived in the same space, but we have seen each other. So she's been my best friend. This other woman is now my it has been my best friend since the period of the divorce. Like,
Mm.
and I was like, dang, we probably, if I had this understanding of life, we would have been best friends if I was building on my based on my core values and what I wanted to experience in a friendship. She was always that best friend, even though I was hanging out more with other people.
So good. Oh my, does this sound familiar, anybody? This is so beautiful. And one thing that I love so much, because I'm always explaining this to people, and they, once I share a story, they typically are like, oh, okay, I can see that. But a lot of times my clients are resistant to looking at, oh, like, how are people investing in me? How are people connecting with me? How are people, even if it's just I go to a party and people are listening to me intently, right? Like, how are people giving me, as you said, their presence, that
Mm-hmm.
gift of connection? They're often resistant to doing that because they think, oh, well, then I will miss all of the ways that people aren't reciprocating, that people aren't investing back in me, and all the ways that people don't care. But what actually happens is they get so focused on the people that don't care that they miss the ones that do. Right? They miss the ways that people are investing in them, the ways in which people are loving on them, again, giving them that gift of presence, paying attention, all of the things, like witnessing them, oh, all of the things. And what Sade said, because there are so many things about that, the rings, the values, and choosing friendships. Because I think also, this is just me personally, I think proximity is important for a lot of people. In person interaction is important for a lot of people. But what you just said about, oh, I missed that, we probably would have been friends earlier, but I missed that. So good. Like paying attention, because that's one thing that we talk a lot about. So, oh my gosh, I love that so much.
Yeah, I mean, and it really is true because we only have so much attention to give and so much space for people.
Exactly.
I read somewhere that at the point where our brains evolved to, we were like evolved for tribes, and tribes were like a maximum of like 100 people or something
Yeah.
like that, some small number. So every person that we allow in a particular proximity to us or a particular level of investment, it's an opportunity cost.
Mm-hmm.
Like if you can have 20 best friends, whatever your number is, right? Like I have two best friends and my big sister who's like a best friend, and I may have room for like maybe one more best friend. Everybody else is like my posse, you know.
Yeah.
But each of them is taking up space that is lost forever to someone else.
Mm-hmm.
And so, if we're giving that space to someone who isn't reciprocating and who isn't investing back, or who is actually maybe even throwing shade, the
Yeah.
frenemies, you're missing out on what you could have if you allowed someone else to take that space. Or you're also missing out on, even if you don't replace that person in that friend group, you're missing out on just having that space to yourself,
Yeah.
just being able to experience that space without all of the churn or the chaos or the problems that are happening there.
Yeah. No, yeah, absolutely. And that number that you're talking about with the 100 people, it's estimated that it's 150 people. It's called Dunbar's number. Uh, and I want everyone to take that into consideration too, because one, I will never not get on this soapbox whenever I don't have a chance, because I don't think we realize how much our online world is impacting our connections, but think about how many Facebook friends y'all have. I mean, just the group I met you in, Sade, had 100 people in it,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah.
We cannot be connected with everybody. We can have sparks of connection all the time, even with the cashier that checks us out at Starbucks. We can have sparks of connection, but our brain really can't comprehend all those people. So be mindful, everybody. Even as you're just scrolling today, you're going to see coworkers that you had even from 10 years ago. You're not supposed to be close to everybody. So that, yes, 1,000%. Well, I want to make sure too we get to some Reddit stories because I know that it is so helpful for people to hear these stories and to really start to imagine and apply the advice and the things that you are saying. It just really helps their brain remember it all. This one is, it's coming from this subreddit called Am I the Asshole? So r/AITAH, and it's called Am I the Asshole for telling my sister it's her fault that she's getting divorced and has no friends? So I, 23 female, have a sister who's 28 who has kids and is going through a divorce. Before my sister had kids, she was the funnest and smartest person around. She had hobbies, took classes every week to learn new skills, and had a close friend group that she maintained until recently that she's had since middle school. I looked up to her and admired her so much, but she hasn't been that way in years. Ever since she had kids, she has become okay, whoa. Ever since she had kids, she has become a personalityless blob. She got married at 21 and they had their kids at 24 and 25, and marriage is not what changed her. Or marriage isn't what had changed her. Before the kids, she was still her fun and eccentric self. After her first child, she stayed home for 6 months and then returned to her job as an art teacher where she made amazing money and could choose her own hours. Oh, art teacher at a country club. That's why amazing money, everybody. Uh, she quit after class, saying that she couldn't await or couldn't bear to be away from her baby. Whenever my other sisters or parents would offer to watch the baby so her and her husband go on date nights, she refused. She won't let anyone take care of the baby but her. She got pregnant again on purpose. She wanted them a year apart, and I'm not joking when I say she hasn't left the house to do anything without her babies. She canceled on every plan by friends, who, by the way, half of them are moms, made for the past 2.5 years. Oh, canceled on every plans that were made for the past 2.5 years, and then got shocked when no one no longer talked to her. She gets upset her husband still has friends and hobbies outside of being a dad. She let herself go physically. She will brag about not showering for days, but her kids always look good. Only posts and reposts about being a mom. She brags about not having a life outside of being a mom. She brags about never missing an hour with her kids. And she looks down on moms that go out and have fun. She missed all of our family birthdays, events, if she can't bring her kids with her. And it sucks to see my sister become this. Okay, then she says, I get that it's a major change. She goes on about that for a little bit. And then she said, her husband filed for divorce a month ago, and I think that was my sister's reality check. When she called us in a group chat crying, we all just looked at each other and were like, okay, be for real. Oh my goodness. Okay. Our parents included. She told us he wants a divorce because he wants his old wife back and that she changed for the worst instead of the better. And she thinks he should be grateful that she dedicates her whole life to her kids, since other moms would pester the dads to be more involved. Our dad spoke up and asked her when the last time was they went on a date or put their marriage first. And she said they're parents now, so their kids come first, and that's no longer as important. My mom even offered to watch the kids for a weekend so maybe they could have a moment alone, and she got very upset, saying she would never leave her kids with someone else so she could have fun, and then she hung up. A few days ago, my sister asked me to come over and bring her groceries since her tire was flat. I came inside, we talked about life as her kids napped. I asked her about the divorce and how she feels, and she said he wants a 50-50 custody and there's no way that's happening. Since she never spends a second away from her kids, as she wants our parents to pay for the best divorce lawyer to ensure she gets full custody. And I said, you mean the parents, yet you never allow to babysit your kids? She got upset and said that doesn't matter. I told her it does, and that she's refused to allow herself to have a village. And she looks down on other women that have someone babysit, bad mom. So it sounds like our OP here, our original poster, said that to her. This is really long. And she said that she wouldn't be friendless if she made these changes. And all my siblings and parents are on my side, saying it's the truth that she needed to hear. But she started crying, and I felt bad, and I left. So, is this person the asshole? What do you think, Sade?
Well, I mean, it sounds like she cares very much about her sister. But my opinion is that she's making I guess, a non-professional judgment based on what you see on the outside. I think if this person came to me, that's the sister, and said, "Hey, this is what's going on. I'm going through a divorce. Can you help me?" I would probably refer her to a therapist. I mean, it just really sounds like some major changes happened after she had her first child. And that's always a trigger, like, hey, is there some postpartum mental health changes happening? And so a therapist or a psychiatrist would probably be the best person to talk to in that scenario. I will also say that within a marriage, it can be really difficult for people on the outside to know what's really happening.
Mm.
Um, it's just, and there's also a lot of shame around problems within a marriage. So while it looks like um, this woman is the problem in her relationship because of all of the outward appearances and all of the outward signals, uh, intimate romantic relationships are very it's almost like they are this thing that, no, if you're not in the relationship, always
Mm-hmm.
have a little caveat on what you think you see or what you think you know, because there are some relationships that are covertly abusive, and there's a manipulating that can happen, gaslighting. There's just all kinds of things that could be happening in that scenario that just it's just hard to see. So when it looks like a woman is letting herself go physically, some of those things could be stress based. Some of those things
Mm.
could be her identity or her self esteem coming under attack. So it's just really, there's no way to know. Only a therapist or a psychiatrist could really tell in this situation what's going on, whether it's postpartum depression or it's, abuse, or maybe she's just got her own very strong opinions and it has nothing to do with that. So I couldn't really speak to
Mm-hmm.
what this person. I have just heard so many stories and worked with so many women going through so many different divorces. There's just no way to know.
Yeah. I love that you said that though, because that allows everybody to really pause and think, and I think to have more empathy and more perspective when it comes to anybody's situation. And to be fair to everybody, just in case you didn't know, I think I've said this before, but I don't read these ahead of time because I don't think it's fair for me to already know what I'm going to say and not somebody else. So I look for great titles, I look for great engagement, and that's it. But I do think that is helpful for people to hear in general, for uh, somebody, whether they are interested in like self confidence coaching, whether they are interested in dating after divorce coaching, it's helpful for them to hear, okay, this is what it looks like to maybe at this point not be at a baseline. This is something that might be
Mhm.
helpful for you to get other support, because I think the more we make that differentiation clear for everybody, the easier it is because for people to take action, decide. And I also
Yeah,
agree with the again like supporting that empathy piece of it and perspective.
yeah.
So I do think that's
I
helpful
do
for everyone to
have,
hear.
right. And one more thing on that is our world is so much more complex than it used to be.
Yeah.
It's so, like, I would say at least 50% of my clients are in therapy. They came to me while working in therapy or as
Yeah.
part of their growth. So I know that things are so complex. I have one client um, who, and her story is on my podcast, 63. She's met her partner, very happy. But at the time that we were working together, she was not working with a therapist because she was pretty healthy. She was good to go with dating. But during that period, her parents, were aging. So she's
Mm-hmm.
63. Her parents were a lot older, and she was started experiencing some anticipatory grief that they would pass soon, and there were some other things that happened in her life, and I was like, sis, you need therapy, not because there's anything wrong with you, and not
Mm-hmm.
because we're not being successful finding your partner. At that time, she hadn't met her partner. She met him, as part of the journey. But I was like, you really need to be talking to a therapist about this grief that you're experiencing, because it makes a lot of sense. You've had some losses in your life, and you're anticipating new losses that are triggering the old losses. So I think having multiple sources of support there's no reason not to. The world
Yeah.
is different. There's a lot happening in the world. I'm just gonna say that. We all know
Yeah.
that.
Yeah, and no, you're so right. It's so funny you say this because I was telling somebody that the other day. Like, I think it works really well to, if you're able to do it, to have a therapist and a coach because, and a lot of my clients do that too, especially because I help people with high functioning social anxiety. I help people feel more connected and really enjoy being themselves. So, a lot of times there can be deeply rooted shame or relational trauma and attachment issues that come up with that. And like, they find that it's really helpful to have a therapist to really go to those places, go deep, process those really, really big, heavy emotions to, go into the past and create understanding. And then hear, right, about like, okay, how do we move forward? What are skills? How do we want to approach this? I also think too that I'm also an educator, and I know you are as well, like on, okay, here is the knowledge that we have about whether it's the patriarchy, whether it's about friendship, whether it's about connection, and even as well, there's a lot of evidence based, and this is what I use with my clients, and the only things I use with my clients is evidence based practices for self esteem building, because that is a skill and confidence, but I do not do like devolve what I can't say that word delve okay into therapy. And I think that's helpful to know. I also have a lot of clients, and this surprised me, but a lot of clients that are therapists. uh, One of them even owned a therapy center. So, like, I think if that shows anything, right? Like, they believe in therapy, obviously, uh, go and get help with therapy. A lot of my clients that are therapists also have therapists and then come to this space as well, again, for specific skills. And so I think that's really helpful to explain. I will say, so as far as this story goes, Sade, I do think a lot of people, actually, I don't think, I know a lot of people, and even though I'm not a parent, I do know that a lot of people prioritize their kids first and foremost over themselves, over their relationship, over their friendships. And we see this in certain data. We are spending more time, and I say we specifically, this applies to Americans. I'm sure this is prevalent in some other countries as well, but we are spending more time with our kids and not with our friends. Whereas in the past, it used to be kids and friends together. It was let's bring our kids around what we are doing, what, barbecue we're going to, what, I don't even know, right? Like yoga in the park that we're doing, or whatever it might have been, bowling alley with our friends. It was let's bring our kids to these things and spend time with our friends, and then the kids can go play. That is starting to happen less and less. And I personally, and again, this is coming from someone that's not a parent, but I know as a parent, you have to have a lot of, right, like emotional, if you will, like flexibility to be a parent in order to keep doing the setting boundaries and being a nurturing, safe space for your kids. I can only imagine the roles that takes and how you have to do that all day long. And I think it's really necessary for people to have a filled cup, to be pouring into their cup in order to respond that way and do that. Because the truth is, and there's actually this story by Doctor, she calls herself Dr. Becky. She talks about parenting. She's a psychologist. And one of her stories, and this is again coming from a psychologist that teaches people about this, is an expert in this field. And she said that she yelled at her son because he made a comment about dinner because she had nothing pouring into her cup. She had no reservoir to tap into. So, anyway, what are your thoughts on that, Sade?
Yeah, for sure. No, I agree with you. I mean, I hadn't looked into the statistics of that time spent together, but I think I have definitely observed it. Um, One of the draws, what I guess when I was a homeschool mom, one of the things we, like I said, the philosophy around our homeschool groups was the fact that we didn't like the fact that society was being segregated by age. So people of a certain age were only hanging out with people of a certain age. So it's like your kid in middle school would only hang out with other kids in middle school, and then high schoolers would only hang out with high schoolers, and then parents would only hang out separately. Whereas I think culturally that's new, and I think that's definitely very much. I haven't observed too many other cultures other than mine, Nigerian and the US. But in Nigeria, there were no kids' birthday parties. When you had a kid who was turning 5, all the children came, and all the parents of all the children came, and
Yeah.
all the siblings of all the children came. So you invitations were sent to whole families,
Mm.
not to individuals in the family. And so whenever there was a party, whether it was a party for a 2-year old or a party for a 60-year-old, entire families were attending the party together. I believe that's the same in many South American cultures, but now you have this, oh, it's a 14-year-old girl's birthday party, and then you have 20 14-year-old girls, nobody else. And so um, again, a lot of that, I don't know why that's happening, but I've certainly observed that, and I certainly agree that that is not the healthiest. And the way it impacts mothers is it's another add-on
Mhm.
to all of the domestic and emotional labor that the woman has been tagged to fulfill. And so it ends up being just one more thing the mother has to make happen. So, you gotta cook, you gotta clean, you gotta make sure everyone's happy, you gotta do all those things. And then you also have to then find this specific time to take one specific child to this one specific birthday party.
Mhm.
Um, and so, yeah, I think that definitely is a thing. Um, Filling a woman's cup. Now, that the way I look at that, I have my philosophies around filling the adult's cup, which are a little bit radical. um, I had to sort of build that back up after my divorce because I was doing the opposite before. It was all about the kids and it was all about the marriage. And I realized that, especially because of the stress of the marriage and the stress of the divorce, I was having like certain physical symptoms, heart palpitations, things that I was like, oh my God, do I have something? Am I going to die?
Mm.
And once I realized, no, you're fine. It's just stress. You need to get over the stress. I thought about the fact that the best gift that I could give my children, even though society tells us that, oh, yes, in order for your kids to be happy, you need to do all these things. I realized that the best gift I could give my children was a healthy mother. Like, if I can be the mother that they don't have to take the time out from their work and their families when they have families to take me to 1,000 doctor's appointments. If they don't have to become caregivers for me at a time when they should be building their own lives, I was like, I think that's a gift. So it might look like I'm not giving them all the things, but if they are 40 and not having to deal with things that I could have prevented, I think that would be a gift. And so it really just turns self-care on its head in the sense that self-care is not just for me. Self-care is a gift to the people that I love as well.
Beautiful. Beautiful. And also, let's bring like back family parties, everybody. Let's bring some
Yes.
of it back. I love that.
Yeah, let's have little kids running around making a mess. Why
Yeah.
not?
Why not? Oh my gosh, I love it. I love it. Well, I have one more story for you. And this one's really sweet. So this one isn't actually a story, but this is somebody asking for advice. So maybe I lied. Maybe I do have more than one. But uh, I think this is really sweet. So it says, my best friend is getting a divorce. My best friend is in the process of getting divorced. She was a wife of 6 years and she decided she's not in love anymore. No violence, no cheating, no kids. Only real asset is the house, and that goes up for sale by the end of the month. But as the best friend here, I'm looking for advice. Like, what do I do? What did your best friend say or do that made things easier, even slightly better? Are there any books that I can get him? Anything I can do? I'm at a loss and I want to help. So, what
Yeah, oh,
comes up
that's
for
so
you?
sweet. That is so, I love that. I love that this person is like, oh, I really want to be there for my friend and I want to learn. I love the approach of not, you know, not feeling like, oh, they know exactly what to do, but being like, what is the right thing to do? And there is a certain, I think the etiquette around divorce is similar to the etiquette around grief. And so if you
Mm,
want an easy way to say, okay, what is right for me to do here? The person who's getting a divorce is going through some kind of grief because there is some kind of loss in there. So typically just presence is great. My friend, the one I told who is now my best friend, one of the gifts she gave me over a period of 2 years before I finally decided I was done venting was just listening when I vented. Like I would vent, and I'm pretty sure I vented excessively because I talk a lot. I vented a lot, and I would call her every day. Oh my God, can you believe he did this? This guy is terrible, and she would just listen and she was just available to listen. She never really gave me like a lot of advice because she didn't know what to do, but she would just be there and validate my emotions and just her being willing to pick up the phone when I called and be there for me or let me come over or times that she would come over. That was just priceless. So the gift of presence, none, no judgment, even when the person is making decisions that you think are terrible,
mhm.
because divorce is a period where some really bad decisions are just gonna get made. There's
Yeah.
no avoiding it. Everybody's gonna make some decisions that aren't great during that period. So reassuring your friend that you're there, you're like, hey, I'm not sure you should be doing that, but I'm here for you. Okay, like just letting them know that you're there for them. If they invite your opinion, let them know what you think about things when they tell you. But a lot of just validation, presence, love, understanding that they are grieving, even if it doesn't look like they're grieving. That's just amazing.
Yeah. No, I totally agree. And I think to add to that, and I don't know what genders or where they fall on the spectrum, but they did mention like him, so that their friend is a
Mhm.
guy. So I just want to say too, and this, I mean, this goes for really anybody, but talking about the kind of support somebody wants is really helpful. There was this article that came out recently on this question, and oh goodness, for the life of me, I can't remember if it was the Atlantic, Washington Post. It was one of those, one of those. And the author used this question of, do you want to be hugged, heard, or helped right
Mm.
now? And I love that so much because sometimes I think that other question of, oh, are you looking for like support or advice? Sometimes it's like, well, then what advice do you have for me? But I love that this question really focuses on the needs and allows that person to be like, oh, I do want to be hugged. I do want to be heard. I
Mhm.
do want, like advice or to be helped in this kind of way. And then you could even open it up because it can be helped can be bigger than just advice. It can be like, I want help moving stuff out of this house, whatever it may be. So presence, best gift you can ever give somebody is connection. And I'd say communicating. Now, the reason why I brought up genders in the first place is we also know that women tend to have more what's called like face to face interactions, where we look at each other, we see each other, we really witness each other, we get vulnerable, we do all the things. And men tend to have side by side friendships that are centered around an activity: golf, sports, video games, right? Like side by side, here I am hanging out with my buddy. And so I know that asking a man, because of the patriarchy, asking a man to have a more face-to-face conversation and say that might feel like too big of a vulnerability risk. It's so if that is the case, I would recommend, you know, if you are like saying, okay, I can help you move those, like pack up. We can go golfing. We can go on a walk even. And then ask that question of, okay, like how can I be supportive? I think as well, and Rochelle said this on a previous episode that, and it's my favorite quote now, and it is between what is said and not meant, and what is not said but meant, so much love is lost. And I think
Mm.
just expressing to this person that you care so much that you're asking all these questions and you are submitting to Reddit to get these questions answered, just knowing that and that somebody is there for them in this way is so helpful. Now, I have one more question for you, Sade, and it looks like the
Yeah.
story is gone, but I know you have so much to say about this, and I'm so sorry to bring it at the end of the episode. But uh, it's about being divorced in a small town, and
Mm.
it was so it's somebody on Reddit. It's called like r/divorced women. I can't find the original story, but it is like, okay, how do you find somebody that checks your boxes if you're divorced in a small town? What do you have to say about that?
Well, it depends on the small town, and it depends on how many people are in the small town. So I often will challenge people because we do come to dating with a scarcity mentality.
Mm.
There's just always like this like immediate people in New York will tell me the same thing, like, oh my God, how do you find someone in New York? There's no more good men in New York. Seriously. I
Yeah.
hear this all the time. So I would say, first of all, we'd have to define small town. I mean, if your town has more than, I don't know, 20,000 people, I think you can find someone in a town of 20,000 people.
Yeah.
Like seriously. So when you're saying small town, I would validate that, oh, you might not be able to find someone here. I don't know if your town was like 3,000 people or 5,000 people. No, just really tiny where basically everybody knows everybody else.
Mm-hmm.
But the typical small town that I am thinking of is is in the US today. Many of them are attached to bigger suburbs, many of them attached to bigger cities, so it's a complicated question to answer since I don't know the specifics of this person, but I will say, if you can drive, if there are people, I would count your small town as people who live an hour or less away. So that's the radius. So first of all, don't just think about the people that live in your zip code. Think of people who are living an hour away. And I like to use an hour as like the max when people are dating, because then each person can drive 30 minutes. It's close enough that you could get to know each other with a little bit of effort.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't recommend anything more than that. The second thing I would put out there is that I'm assuming that this person loves their small town, which is why they're there.
Yeah.
If you love your small town and you're there, that means that the attributes of the people there and the experience you are having there is part of your core values.
Boom. Yes.
So then think about it. All the people out there are likely to be the kinds of people that you want to be around. But what sometimes happens is people are living in a small town, they're living in a place that doesn't match their core values. And they really should consider moving, not just so that they can find a partner, but so that they can have the life that they want. And when they're living the life that they want, they're very likely to find the partner that they want. So the answer there is, if you're living in a small town, live the life that matches your core values in that small town. Go to the rodeo. I mean, I know I'm being cliche here. Like, go to the rodeo, go fishing, go boating, whatever the unique things are about your town. Join the pie
Yeah.
contest. Lord forgive me, I know this is probably problematic, everything I'm saying.
I love it.
you know but if you love those things, do them, and you will meet people. And here's another tip. Okay, don't just meet people who could be your partner. That is the other problem that people have. So women, I work with women, but I'm sure men do this too. They're looking at, is there, and they walk into a room and they're like, is anybody single here? No, that's not how to do that. You want to connect with everyone, because that 14-year-old girl may have a single dad. That 75-year-old woman may have a single son or a single nephew, or like, everyone is connected to somebody who's connected to somebody who might be your perfect person.
Yeah.
So really just live your best values-based life in that environment and connect with a ton of people. Let them know in a classy way that you're single and looking. There are ways to do that.
Yes.
And then you'll find a person, small town or not. It's really just about being who you are in a way that's visible wherever you are.
Yes. Anybody else just giddy with that? That was so clear and compelling and powerful. And I think it relates to what you said earlier about like, are you missing somebody? Right? Like what we talked about. Are you missing somebody? So we have again the 50 green flags for a healthy relationship that we will link in the show notes. But if everybody wants to, go jump and like check out more of your work, where can they find you, Sade?
Yes, you can find me on the Dating After Divorce podcast. It is available on all the podcast platforms. It's my favorite place to hang out. You can also find me on Instagram at Sade Curry. It's SadeCurry. And then my website, sadecurry.com.
Super easy. It's simple for everybody. Okay, go check out their work. If you are listening and you know of somebody as well that could really benefit from hearing this, send this episode their way. Send them Sade's information. And Sade, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Jill. It's such a pleasure. I appreciate your invitation.
Oh, I just adore you. Thanks for joining me on the Socially Delightful podcast. I'm Jewel, and I'm truly so grateful that you came and hung out with me today. If this podcast meant something to you, it would mean so much to me if you left me a review so that way I could keep making content that you love. And if you really want to make my whole day, share this podcast to your Instagram story and tag me at Connection with Jewel so I can shout you out. Or send me a message and let me know what resonated with you or what you want to hear next. And I'll see you at the next episode.